This, God willing, will be the third and final episode of the Children of Israel series. And God willing, on the next Monday, the 3 episodes will be digested into 1 episode. It will be a little long. I mean, for those who have time, they would like to hear the whole story from the beginning so that the picture will be complete before their eyes. We stopped the previous episode at Theodor Herzl. We said that it was a turning point in the fate of the cause of the children of Israel in general. So let us see what he did and when and what is the cure. Let us see. Theodor Herzl became a rich secular man with money and a journalist with his own newspaper. Neither Judaism as a religion filled his brain nor even Hebrew, in which he knew 2 words together. But the man had a bank and a newspaper. I mean money and the media, so take care and put a lot of lines under it. A Protestant Christian group had appeared in England before Herzl. About 100 years ago, she was saying that Christ would come again. Sahyun is a prophecy. This is a prophecy. Take care. I mean, here is a clear religious goal before your eyes, and this Sahyun cowardice is in Jerusalem, where the famous journalist who was killed by the Zionist occupation was buried last year. In contrast to what the Protestants said, there are some sects of Jews who said, "We will not return. Who will push us back if we return and reunite?" In one place, our prophecy says that this will be the end of all of us and the countries you see sometimes, either in America, Britain, or other European countries. There are demonstrations in which they stand with Muslims against the Zionist entity, so you get confused and say, "God, how are the Jews?" and against Zionism. Then Herzl came and went, making a mix. Thus, between the prophecy of the Protestant Christians and the Jewish sects who had the idea of gathering in one place instead of the winter, Herzl took the idea of the group of lovers of Sayun, and with his financial and media victory, he convinced the Jews who were already convinced of the idea of return, and under the word return, there was a million dangers. When you go to work in a country abroad for 10 years, you say, "I'm done with this, enough is enough, and I will return to your homeland." Will you return to the homeland you originally came from? But when I tell you that I did a DNA test for you and your great-grandparents came from North Korea 3 years ago, does that give you the right if you go to Kim Young-ju and say that's what you are? On the creation of the night, otherwise, by the same logic, we will return to the Red Indians the half of America above, and we will return the second half to the Mexicans, because it is essentially the land of the ancestors of the great-grandfathers, and it does not mean that the faraway listens, but with one wish. The important thing is that from 1870 to 1897, the Lovers of Zion organizations were promoting the same idea that they later adopted. Herzl, but it was theoretical and there was no work on the ground until the Basel Conference in Switzerland on August 29 in the year 1097, which was led by Theodor Herzl, who pumped his money into it and also supported it with his media, and he had partners who also entered with him, just like the Rothschilds, and his family was one of the famous billionaires who emerged from this conference. O believer in the so-called Basel program, and whose idea is summed up in establishing a national homeland for the Jews in any place, with the mention of Palestine, meaning as a goal and primary destination, is the first line. However, they chose other countries, for example, such as Argentina, Uganda, and others as places that would be useful to gather them in. If the idea of Palestine was Basel, and after Theodore left his famous letter to Sultan Abdul Hamid II, they said, "With your Majesty's permission, we want a piece of land like this for the Jews to live in Palestine in exchange for cancelling your state's debts, which are in the millions, and putting millions in the treasury." And keep in mind, Palestine at that time was... Why are there Jews in it at all? As we said before, but they are all against each other. They do not complete 2 and 8 out of 10 of the total population, as it is the same presence that was in many Arab countries at that time. Indeed, their presence in countries such as Egypt and Iraq, for example, was many times greater than their presence in Palestine. Of course, the Sultan refused. Abdul Hamid II categorically refused and said to Nulinsky, who brought him the letter, "Every ban on the face of the world, I will not spare a single inch of this land. Let the Jews keep millions, and if my state, which is the Caliphate state, is torn apart, then Palestine can be obtained for free." And this is what actually happened, unfortunately, with World War I in the year 1944, and also before the fall of the entire Ottoman Caliphate bloc in 1924. And the first decision, O believer, after the fall of the Caliphate was to cancel the clause prohibiting Jews from residing in Palestine, as we will see a little later. And at that time, there was the famous demarcation plan for the areas areas under French control. Known as the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916, we will not forget, of course, the promise of British Foreign Minister Arthur Balfour 1 year later in 1917, in which he promised to establish a national homeland for the Jews in Palestine. And 1917, keep in mind, is the same year in which the British Army entered Palestine under the leadership of the martyred Libyan general. Please focus with me. This is a promise from the British Foreign Office issued not to an official body. It was issued to Lord Lionel de Rothschild, Herzl's owner, and the most famous of the wealthy Jewish notables in Britain, who contributed greatly to the implementation of Herzl's plan after Herzl himself died in the year 194. Meanwhile, Britain continued to oust Sharif Hussein in the Arabian Peninsula. With the story of his great deceptions, help us eliminate the Ottoman Caliphate so that we can help you move the seat of the Caliphate to your beautiful Arab land and then expel Abdulaziz al-Saud from Britain. And in order to fight Sharif Hussein after contributing to the overthrow of the Caliphate, he began to demand of them the Arab Caliphate. This is in the famous story of Lawrence of Arabia, and the salaries that were revealed after that were paid by tongues and chopped, so your honor, they were all done with British weapons and arrangement. And who was the beginning of a new formation for the entire region? Britain occupies the region and calls it a British mandate instead of occupation. The British in these words were in the year 1924, meaning with the immediate fall of the Caliphate, and the systematic immigration of Jews actually began after the fall of the law that prevented it. Here the difference remained between the Jews who rejected the idea of occupation and preferred to remain in the country in which they were born and lived, and those who embraced the Zionist ideology and supported it and traveled and occupied, as we will see. After a while, financing began, regrettably, to buy lands from the Palestinians, but they were shocked that the vast majority were holding on so strongly.
عايزة تبيع زي ما كانوا متخيلين، فتستمر برضو الهجرة بوتيرة أكبر وأكبر، ويدخل بقى هتلر هنا على الخط في الحرب العالمية الثانية، ويبدأ يحط على اليهود ويطاردهم في أرجاء ألمانيا كلها. فهنا يستغل بقى الصهاينة الموقف ويقولوا لهم ما قلنا لكم تعالوا معانا من الأول، ومع ذلك احنا لسه بابنا مفتوح، يا أهلا بيكم ويا مرحبا. والصورة اللي قدامكم دي للاجئين يهود جايين على شواطئ فلسطين سنة 1947، وحاطين عليها اليافطة بالخط العريض: الألمان دمروا عائلاتنا، نرجوكم لا تدمروا أحلامنا. بس خد بالك مين اللي كان بيحكم فلسطين وقتها؟ الانتداب البريطاني. اللهم للصهاينة دول بيتمسكنوا كده وكاتبين الكلمتين دول لبريطانيا ليه وهي حبيبتهم؟ بل هي اللي مكنتهم من فلسطين أساسا وساعدتهم كمان في خطة الهجرة، ولولا بريطانيا كان كل المخطط ده فشل من الأول وما تنفذش فيه خطوة واحدة. كلمة السر حضرتك في المقاومة الفلسطينية، المقاومة اللي بدأت من اليوم الأول للمخطط والثورة العربية الكبرى اللي قامت سنة 1936 بعد استشهاد عز الدين القسام سنة 1935، وخلت البريطانيين نفسهم يصدروا تعليمات بتخفيف أعداد الهجرة إلى فلسطين، بل كانوا بيرجعوا مهاجرين كمان جايين على شواطئ فلسطين من ضغط المقاومة عليهم. وفي الوقت ده حضرتك كانت وصلت أعداد الصهاينة اللي دخلوا فلسطين، خلاص بقى مش هنقول اليهود تاني، هم صهاينة، كانت أعدادهم وصلت ل 22% تقريبا من اجمالي السكان. شايف بقى حضرتك الاسم اللي على المركب اللي بتنقلهم فدي ده؟ تبقى عصابات الهجانة ومعاها الارجن الصهيونية المسلحة بأسلحة حديثة من بريطانيا ومن امريكا وبعض الدول الاوروبية، وطبعا مش اي تسليح حضرتك، انت بتتكلم عن ضباط وجنود متدربين ميدانيا مع الجيش البريطاني. الهجانة والارجن دول بقى حضرتك قلبوا على بريطانيا نفسها. ولو شفت معانا حلقة
My issues. A few weeks ago I mentioned the story of the destruction of the King David Hotel by the Legs, which contained British people and killed them. Because of that, Britain classified them as a terrorist group led by Menachem Begin, who later became the Prime Minister of the occupation. Glory be to God, O believer, the situation changed and he received the Nobel Peace Prize along with Yitzhak Rabin. The one who committed a crime in Haifa and is wanted to stand trial on charges of war crimes that I saw as terrorists, and thus they remain prime ministers with the Nobel Peace Prize. It is also very simple. The important thing is that the men and the rabble were carrying out revenge operations in Britain, which originally brought them and armed them because the numbers of immigrants decreased a little at the same time, Mr. The Zionist gangs that I am telling you about were carrying out countless massacres among the Palestinians, and the destruction was completely ruined, as Herbert Smith, the British ruler of Palestine at the time, and of course could see. There is no accountant or supervisor because Herbert the British, who rules Palestine, was originally Jewish, our honor. Of course, the Palestinian resistance and the great Arab resistance at that time continued, believer, despite the lack of experience, training, and weapons, and greater names emerged, including the Syrian Izz al-Din al-Qassam, whom we mentioned a little while ago, and about whom we made this episode of 4 years have passed, and what is called today does not need Arabization. Officially, from the first day until you heard this episode, Palestine literally did not stop resisting, not even today in Gaza, tomorrow in the West Bank, after that in the interior, it never stopped. Thousands of them were martyred, hundreds of them were executed, and thousands of them were also arrested. Britain itself is the one that began demolishing the homes of the resistance fighters, and the Zionist occupation is still carrying out this against the Palestinians until today. However, the resistance has not been deterred or stopped. He is sitting on his stomach like this and holding the mobile phone. It is the origin of the Palestinians who sold their land. I say this to you, this needs sources, my love, sources. I mean paper by paper, not broth like the one that is locked in this stomach and workers are making gases out of it. In the comments on God's creation, look, Dad, the Barak Revolution in 1929, and the Great Arab Revolt in 1936, the events of June 17, individual actions, displacement by force of arms after they refused money and selling with his consent, and many details that made children gray. As for the Zionists of the Arabs, let someone like that read this book to you so that you know what the Zionists are. They see you as a little insect that has no value for you at all, but you must be crushed. Also, despite your desire to slip under your boots, I don't see you as this, but no, they see us as this too. You also see that even the Christian West, which supplies them with money and weapons, is also this way. By God, this is their principle, Father, so do others. Jealousy, but for your humanity, not for your religion and your homeland. Their principle by God is from 1896 and by Herzl himself. Well, this is David Ben-Gurion, a soldier of Jewish origin who was a soldier in the British Army who entered Palestine in 1917. He later became with the Hajana and Jordanian gangs and added to them the Hashemirs, the Ashturns, the Bergeriyas, and many others, and she said it was all the same. They are just wreaking havoc on the land, causing corruption, terrorizing the people, killing, war, massacres of years, displacing Korah as it was, and systematically dispossessing the lands until the promised day when Britain said in 1977, "Peace be upon you, I am walking, I don't want another assignment, that's it, the game is over, the year is 1977. This is Britain, and I will follow suit." The owners of the land who have been grinding their groceries for years have no resources, armament, or institutions, and they also leave behind the poor, except for their number of migrations. It all arrived during her reign. It remained close to 40% of the total population. There were 580,000 Zionists. Can you imagine Al-Tagsil being easygoing, armed with British and American weapons? In fact, they still had weapons factories on the land of Palestine, and they also produced them, controlling the actual command places, and under their feet were strategic places in every place that Britain had left. He became a former Briton, and today he became a Zionist, and he remained, and overnight on May 14, 1948, Al-Sahina appeared and was led by the declaration of an occupying state, and they appointed David Ben-Gurion, the gangster whom we talked about a while ago, as their first prime minister. And immediately Uncle America announced its recognition of their state, and then Iran under the patronage of the Shah at that time, and then the Union. The Soviet and then the countries repeated each other a lot, and of course this was under American pressure. 1 year after this declaration, on May 11, 1949, oh God, the United Nations accepts the membership of the Zionists as a recognized state from scratch. Of course, it is known at the time that 7 Arab countries tried, meaning to declare war on the Zionists after the declaration of the year 1948. We all know the story of the fake weapons and the exchanges that took place at that time, but the truth is otherwise. The whole truth lies in the fact that may God protect you from the evil of this shameful beautiful Arab countries. They have not appreciated their numbers, nor their experience in all these past years, nor the modern weapons that come to them from victorious countries in a world war. Each country participated in it with a symbolic number. This is why attendance is necessary. We record our name on 2 dates only that we participated. The Nakba, Your Honor, was from the same year in 1948. The Nakba that left behind hundreds of thousands of refugees. Al-Sahina took control of all the area that your eyes saw from the land in. The people of Palestine were divided between refugees and those besieged in the West Bank and Gaza, and between the Arabs of the interior who preferred to remain in their land. And today the only means or identity that we carry is the identity of the occupying state. We need an episode that we can do one day, God willing, in order to understand what the Palestinians of the interior mean. It is important that we remain. Today, we are faced with a great power that is trying to establish a new reality with the pressure of the Zionist lobby on it, which is widespread in all aspects of these great countries and is affecting their decisions. And just so you know, good thing we win the Zionists in countries that have reached 2 levels, for example, in the West, Europe, and America. The Catholic Church in 1965 officially ruled out that the Jews would have anything to do with murder. Christ, they discovered the truth so suddenly, 1,900 years after the event, which we as Muslims deny in form and substance, of course, and do not believe in it, but see where the pressure of the Zionists has reached and remains. The dream of the Crusades that we were talking about remained, of 1099, 1091, 1202, and to the West. All of these dreams are still alive in the West, but with new faces and a functional state to achieve in its place. No, the Zionists will be confronted again after that in the setback of 67 and let go of the picture that was not undesirable. The year 1098 and 48 turns into 97, and this scene every day and the other on the screens in front of the whole world, murder, arrest, and displacement, and whoever resists is immediately said to be a terrorist, even though international law says that the struggle of peoples for their independence, the safety of their lands, and freedom from colonialism and apartheid is a short right in all ways. Available, including the armed struggle, and put 1,000 thoughts under the armed struggle that I am talking about. What you said in a few minutes was once upon people, the impact of families of their entire lives under, and whoever received 3 episodes needed to remain 30 and 100, but social media does not have time to listen to the details, but the displacement of the people in Jerusalem and in the heart of the West Bank until today is an extension of this story. The persecution of the Palestinians on their land by a usurping Zionist occupier is also an extension of this story, and the limit that is happening in Gaza and the reason for all this story that we told is an extension of this story. And I will put under this video the jokes of all the episodes that I made about Palestine from the beginning, so that if anyone is interested in knowing more details, the story, believer, is still not over, because the resistance has not stopped yet, and by God, it will not break their thorn, or he will gloat over them until the time comes, or the day comes when we will come out and give you good news, God willing. In the editing session, say amen. But that's a believer.